This video has been brought to you by DataVinci Analytics Agency. In this video, we are going to see how to implement Adobe Analytics through Adobe Launch. So what are we going to cover? We are going to cover how to access the Adobe Analytics extension. We are going to see how to provide the report suite IDs. We are going to see the methods to install the Analytics library. We are going to see how to configure the general settings, setting the global variables, link tracking settings, cookie settings, adding plugins and other customizations. Finally, we are going to see how to fire a page load call for Adobe Analytics. Alright, so let's start. Before moving further, I would like to invite you to join up a free group on Facebook, the Digital Optimization League. It's a group dedicated to digital analytics. Here we cover various topics on digital analytics like conversion rate optimization, tag management, data visualization, Adobe Analytics, Google Tag Manager, Google Analytics, and various other things. So looking forward to meet you here. So when you log into your Adobe Launch, right, then over here on the left side, you will see rules, data elements, extensions, publishing flow environments, and hosts. So you need to click on extensions, right? If you have not installed any extensions in the past, then by default, the core extension would be installed for you, right? Next, you need to go to the catalog, and here you will find the various extensions that are available by default for Adobe Launch. So these are similar to feature tags in Google Tag Manager, right? So this one, the Adobe Analytics by Adobe Systems, is the extension that you need to install. So just simply click on install over here. And once you click over this thing, then you will see the other settings like the report suite settings and the various other things that we are going to cover next. But this is how you are going to access the Adobe Analytics extension, or any extension for that matter that is available in Adobe Launch. Providing the report suite IDs is very easy, right? So here you see that there are three options, or three places where you need to provide the report suite IDs. First one is a development report suite ID. If you have a dev environment, which is a standard best practice that needs to be there, right? So that your production data is different from the test data that you would do. And then there is a staging report suite. Now, the difference between staging and development is that staging is supposedly as close as possible to production, but it's still not live for the general audience. Okay, and production is finally the live report suite, that is for the live audience, a live website. The data would be passed into the production report suite. Okay, so here if you have signed in with your Experience Cloud ID, so if you click on these drop boxes, then a list of report suites would be available for you. So that is like a server to server integration, and if you have the relevant accesses, then all the report suite IDs would be available for you. If you have the proper admin access, then almost all the IDs would be available over here. So if you just click over here, then you will see a drop down. You can select the report suite ID which is relevant for the development, staging, and production. In case you do not know the report suite IDs, then you have to get in touch with your Adobe Analytics stakeholder or your Adobe Analytics account manager, or you can approach the client care, right, if you have the relevant accesses, and just confirm with them what is a report suite ID and put them over here. Okay. So now we are going to see how we can manage the analytics library through Adobe Launch. What are the various options for that? Now, by default, the first one is manage the library for me, right? Now, if you are not aware, then whatever we are doing over here by the various forms and the drop boxes and all these radio buttons and all, ultimately gets translated into a big chunk of code, right? And that code takes care of all the functions and all the configurations that we are doing over here. So the kind of tracking and everything, the Adobe Analytics functions are all going to be handled by that big block of code, and that block of code is called a library. Right now, Adobe and for that matter all the major software providers, they keep on updating their code and keep on optimizing it based on the performance enhancements that they see that can be made. So when you say manage the library for me, then you let Adobe manage that big block of code for you, and Adobe would take its prerogative to manage the most optimized version of the library for you. Right now, this is a common option, and this is by the default option, but some companies can have concerns with Adobe managing the code for them, right? So some companies do not prefer this. They want that any update of code that is being made on their digital asset should first be approved by their IT gatekeepers or the development teams, right? So this option would not work in that case. So the other options over here is that you use the library that is already installed on the page. So in case you have already installed the library, so you have put the source of the library code on the page itself, then you can use that library. That would act as a base, and any kind of enhancements you want to do, you can do on top of that with the Adobe Launch Tag Manager, right? So that is one option. The other option is that if you have a location where you have put the library, right? So instead of using these options, you can put the URL of that location, so access that code of JavaScript from here, right? So you can put the code locations over here, and then Adobe Launch will use the library that has been mentioned over here. Okay, then final option is that if you have the code ready with you, so you can open the editor and paste that library code over here. So whatever enhancements you have done, whatever approvals you have taken from your IT team, what is the final code that has been provided by your developers, you can put that code over here. So these are the 4 options that are there. Now in all of these you would see that there's this checkbox that make the tracker globally accessible. So there is an object that is created by Adobe Analytics, right? Most of the times it's the S object, right? So if you check this box and if you go on the page on which Adobe Analytics has been installed or Adobe Launch has been installed, then you can access that particular object. And if you want to see any kind of if you want to debug that object and see the details around that object, then you would be able to access it. Or if you want to create some kind of custom codes that are outside of Adobe Launch, then you would be able to access that. All right, so this is one of the advanced features. By default it is not checked, but in case you want to access the tracker object, then you can select this box and you would be able to access the tracker object. Okay, if you have any questions on what we have covered so far, then put them in the comment section below and I will address them. Alright, so moving forward to configuring the general settings. Alright, moving forward. So what do we have here? The first one is enable European Union compliance for Adobe Analytics, right? So that is nothing but the GDPR compliance. So if you are enabling Adobe Launch or Adobe Analytics in a country which is in Europe, right? So you can click this one, and another tracking cookie name would be enabled over here. So you can provide this sat_track cookie by default. If you want to change this one, so you can provide a new cookie name. Next is character set. By default it's ASCII, which is for the English language, right? So if you have any other language, let's say like Japanese or Chinese or something like that, and if you're installing Adobe Analytics for that one, then you will need to update this character set. By default for English languages, ASCII is fine. Okay, then preset is just a currency code that you want to have over here. So by default it's US dollars. You can select the currency, right? In general, if you find something that is not present in this drop box, which can be rare cases, then you can select custom and you can create a data element and you can retrieve that data element from here and populate that. Okay, now same thing for the currency as well. Now in case of tracking servers, now this is the most critical component. This is where the server of Adobe Analytics has been hosted for you. So whatever calls you are going to make would be passed to this particular server only. Now this is the regular server and this is the server with the secure server address, right? So if you do not have the details around this particular server details, then you can request your client, or you can request your account manager, or if you can just request Adobe Client Care, so they will provide you this information around the tracking server, right? So this is most important. If you do not put this, then no tracking would happen. Any questions, just put in the comment section. Now moving to setting the global variables. So global variables is where you can set the variables that would fire on all the hits. That is, they will fire on page loads as well as event calls. Okay, now I particularly find this section a bit confusing, because in the past I have observed that even though we set the values in the global section, right, they do not seem to work. So there are certain conditions around it that I particularly do not know that why they do not work, but I have done multiple trials and errors in the past, and when we set the values in global variable, then sometimes it works, sometimes it does not work. Okay, so a better option is that once you have created this extension and configured it, or you are just in the middle of configuring it, you save it. Then when you go to rules, okay, so I'll just discard this, and you create a new rule. Then here, let's suppose that you want to fire a tag on a page load. Okay, so we can select event type as a page top, library loaded page top, right? And let's avoid any conditions right now to keep it simple. And here, once you have installed your extension, then along with core you will see all the extensions that you have installed. And here we have Adobe Analytics. Now what do we want to do? We get to three options. One is clear variables, then there is send beacon, and then there is set variables. Okay, so the first thing that you will do is set the variables. Right now, this is something similar to that global settings that we were seeing earlier, right? So here you can set all your evars, right? You can refer to the various data elements, the props, the events, right? You can set the page names, server, referrer if you want to override that, right? And things like that. And here also you have the option to customize this code. So you can add any kind of custom JS that you want to add for any additional tracking. So you can also set the evars, props, and the various variables from here as well. So you can just do s.prop and some JS code, right? And that will feed in the value to prop, right? And similarly you can do for evars or orders or transaction IDs, and particularly for the product variables, the s.product, there is no other option. So in the form fields that are over here, there is no option to set the product fields, right? The product fields would be set only through this particular section, that is the custom code. Okay, so this is how you can set the global variables and be confident about it that they would work. And this section particularly provides more control also, because in the extension as such we do not have any control on the trigger, right? But here we have the control on the trigger that you want to fire on library load or Tom ready or any other condition, or you want to add any extra conditions over here, and then you want to configure your your variables, then you can do from here, right? So instead of configuring the global variables from there, I suggest that you configure from here. Okay, that's my personal preference. Okay, any doubts that you have, you can put in the comment section below. One of the things that I want to address over here is that while I was putting the custom code, I typed in as s.prop equal something, but you will also need to provide the index of the prop or the evar, so s.prop6, s.prop7 or anything like that, then only it will work. There is no as such a general condition where you can just say s.prop or s.evar equal to something. Okay, so just want to address that. Now let's look at link tracking settings. Now link tracking is very easy to understand, right? So the first option that we have is enable click map. So this one works in tandem with the activity map feature, right? So activity map is an optional feature with Adobe Analytics library, and essentially it creates a heat map of the various pages based on the user interaction and the other activities. So enable click map, as the name suggests, would show the areas where users are clicking the most, where users are not clicking, right? So this works with the activity map. So these two work in tandem. Track download links. So here is a list of links which if the user click upon, they would be considered as downloads. So if in the href of any of the anchor tags, the extension is these like doc, docx, excel, ppt and things like that, if they click on this one, then it would be considered as a download link. You can add further any new extensions that are unique to your website, or if you want to delete something, you can delete something, right? Then track outbound links. So any of the links which are having the URL that do not belong to the domain of the website which you have already defined, so they would be considered as outbound links. So you can specify if you want to track certain links as outbound links, right? And here you can specify certain links that you are already aware that these domains are part of your brand umbrella, right? So for example, citigroup.com, citigroup.co.in can be both part of the Citigroup, right? So you can add all the domains over here, right? And by default you have to provide the domain of your website over here, so you can put all the domains over here, and if any links are having that particular domain, right? So they would not be considered as an exit link, and other than those links, everything else would be considered as exit links. Okay, so you also need to consider your testing and staging domains over here, because often at times the staging domains or the testing domains or the development domains are not same as the production domains, and if you do not specify them over here, then while testing for any link with which you will interact, you will trigger an exit link. Okay, then this is related to query parameters. So if you want to keep the query parameters in your link reporting, then you can check this, otherwise you can keep it unchecked, which is the default case. Okay, yeah, so let me know if you have any questions on link tracking. You can put that in the comment section. Now, visitor ID is a very important concept, right? So you might be aware that by default Analytics tracks the visitors by the cookie ID, specifically on the websites and the mobile sites, right? Now what visitor ID does is that it overrides that default value and gives a new value to the cookie. Okay, so this is applicable in those cases where, let's say, you have a visitor and the visitor can log in the site from different platforms, right? And the visitor has the same login ID, so you can encrypt the ID and pass that encrypted value over here, such that it will override the existing value that has been given to the visitor by default. So you can create a data element of type JavaScript, or you can create a data layer type of variable and just populate that value over here. By default you can leave it, it's not mandatory to set. And also be very careful with this one. You need to make sure that it does not pass wrong values or static values, otherwise all the visitors would be considered as the same user. Okay, visitor namespace is something that is used in those cases when the tracking server is a subdomain of Adobe's server, right? So if you are using third-party tracking server, then a subdomain is allotted to you. You can get this information from your account manager or client care. Okay, cookie domain period is applicable in only those cases when you have more than 2 domains, same for first-party domains in your website, in your website domain. So if you do not have more than 2 domains, 2 periods, then you can leave this, right? And this is also applicable if you are having the same setup across multiple websites. So you can create a JavaScript variable that populates a number of domains based on the URL that the user is visiting, and then call that over here. So for example, if you have a setup that is on citigroup.com as well as citigroup.co.in, right? So co.in will have 3 periods, whereas .com would have 2 periods. So you can create a extension, or sorry, you can create a data element and pass that value over here by using this drum icon, such that it will pass a number of periods that are there in the domain on which the user is presently on. Cookie lifetime is very easy to understand, for how long you want the cookie to persist in the user's browser. So you can choose default, or you can choose none, so that it will not persist at all, session, or seconds, and then pass the total number of seconds for which you want to persist the cookie. Right, secure cookies is a very simple concept. So the cookies will only be written in the visitor's browser if the protocol of the URL is on HTTPS. It will not get written on HTTP protocol, that is non-secure URL or website address. Okay, so let me know in the comment section if you have any feedback or any questions regarding the explanation of the cookies. Now finally, how to set the plugins and other enhancements that you can make to your Adobe Analytics implementation, right? So in this section you can add any custom code that you want to set, and basically whatever you put over here would in a way affect your global variables. In my experience, if you put any codes over here for your global variables, then the tendency of those to work are better as compared to the global variables that you put outside of it over here in the global variables section, right? So if you are putting s.ur6 from here, and then you put the s.ur6 over here, then the value that would be picked would be the one that you set in this one. Okay, so for example, if you want to, let's say, take the example of s.ur6 only, and you want to pass this as the URL, right? So you can just do this, and it will store the value of the URL in ur6. Now this section is mostly used for using the various plugins that Adobe provides, or if you have your own plugins your developers have created, then you can use this particular piece, edit custom code, and pass those plugins over here. Okay, so how you are going to do this? So there are 2 sections to using plugin. Okay, so the first section is where you will put the function of the plugin, the code of the plugin, right? All the plugins that you're using, you can put that here. Okay, now above this there are two functions, two codes that are required. First is that if you want to use plugins, then you have to put this one, s.toPlugins equal to true. This is mandatory, right? And the second thing is s.doPlugins, right, equal to function, right? And you can use any variable x, y, z, but mostly it's used s, right? And here you will use the functions of the plugin to set your variables. So for example, if this is, let's assume, the code for get query parameter plugin, right? And query parameter plugin is a plugin that is provided by Adobe, through which you can pick the values that are present in the query parameters in the URLs. Mostly it is used to pick the marketing values, like the various UTM parameters or campaign parameters, and you want to pass this in, let's say, evar1. Okay, so what you can do, since here you have used s, okay, so here also you will have s, and then the function that has been provided by the code of the plugin that is below. So since we are discussing the query parameter function, so the function for query parameter, as I last checked, was util.get query param, right? And you need to then provide in quotes the parameter whose value you want to pick. So it can be like UTM_campaign. So whatever is the value that has been passed in UTM_campaign in the query parameter in the URL, that would be picked and passed into evar1. Okay, so this is how you can use the various plugins and enhance the implementation for Adobe Analytics, right? Let me know if you have any questions by again putting them in the comment section below. Okay, let us now look at how we can create a page load rule for the extension that we have created for Adobe Analytics. Alright, so that's very simple. You need to go to rules, and if you are creating a new rule, so just click on add rule, right? Most of the times the page load happens at these things: DOM ready, library loaded, page top, page bottom, window loaded. It's either going to be DOM ready or library loaded. There are pros and cons of both the approaches, right? I have created a video for this thing, so you can look at that. I will just put the link below for that, and you can decide upon which one you want to take, the DOM ready or you want to take the library loaded. For this one I am taking the library loaded. Okay, now this is a global page load rule that we are creating. That is, it's going to fire on all the pages, and hence we do not need any extra conditions around it in most of the cases. Okay, so I'll keep this one, add conditions, as blank. I'm not going to put anything over here. Now in actions, as soon as you install an extension, so all those extensions start coming up over here. So we will use our Adobe Analytics extension, and whatever configuration we have done in the previous steps that we covered in this video, those configurations would be applicable to this extension only. Okay, now the first one that we are going to take is set variables. Right here, if you want to add any extra variables, like we discussed, that we can add the global variables at least for the page load rule, so something that we want to fire on all the page loads, so that we can configure here. Or if you want to configure something else, right, which is applicable to, let's say, your product variables or something like that, so that we can configure here. Okay, so I'm going to keep it very simple, and here I'll just say evar1 is equals to test. So by default on all the page calls, the value of evar1 would be test. If you want to make it dynamic, we can call some data elements or something like that. Okay, so let's just keep changes. And then once you have set the variables, then what you need to do, you again need to select Adobe Analytics extension, and this time the action type would be send beacon. Okay, so there are two options over here, s.t and s.tl. So TL is specifically for track links, so these are your event calls, and T is specifically for page load calls, right? So just select this one, which is selected by default, and if you keep the changes, right, so and this ensures that the variable is set in the first action, and then you can send the beacon in the second action, right? In case of link calls, you can also go for the third one. You can go for clear variables, which in case some variables are persisting which you do not want them to persist in the various calls. It usually happens in case of events, where sometimes the event duplication happens when you do not clear the variables. So in that case, you can clear the variables, and whatever is there in the browser would get cleared for that particular variable. Okay, so that you can add in the end. It's not usually applicable in case of page load calls, right? So if we just name it test rule, and let's add the name of the tool, right? And who is creating this? DataVinci, right? And then we can add some notes over here, but for that we must save it first. So if we save this, and then we can add a rule, add a note that test rule created on Jan 4th 2020 to demonstrate how to set an AA page load call. Okay, so this particular rule is now available. So what you need to do next is go to your publishing flow, right? Add a new library. So you can also add a library from here, and just say that this is a test library, right? And then select the environment. So here the first one would be development. Add all changes to resources. You will see that the extension that we created, that came, the rules came, and then you can just save and build this library for development. Now the library is getting created over here. So for moving to the next steps, you need to have the relevant access, and if you have the access, then you would be able to keep on pushing this library to the next step. And you need to test this first in your development, and if everything goes fine as per your expectations, then you can just take it till production and publish it, and it will come over here. All right. Okay, so what have we covered in this video? We have covered accessing the Adobe Analytics extension. We have covered how to provide the report suite IDs. We covered the various methods to install the Adobe Analytics library. We covered the various general settings. We covered the settings of the global variables. We looked at the link tracking settings. We looked at the cookie settings. We looked at how to add plugins and other customizations. And finally, we saw how we can add a page load rule in Adobe Launch for Adobe Analytics. Right, so I hope this video was helpful. If you have any doubts, if you have any questions, then feel free to put them in the comment section below, and I will address them as soon as I can. All right, I'm trying my best to make these videos helpful for you. So if you like these videos, then please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below. Thank you very much.